Welcome to the Wise Fiduciary Podcast. I'm Marta Hurst, one of your hosts from Fiduciary Wise. Whether you're a thought leader, service provider, CEO, or decision maker, this podcast is for you. We break down best practices, the services and solutions available to you, discuss the latest topics, and shake up the industry norms. Join us as we explore, challenge, and navigate the future of fiduciary responsibility together. So this season, we're doing something a little different, something a little bolder, something necessary, because let's face it, the 401k world isn't just about safe harbor notices, 5500s, and fund lineups, although we're going to talk about that anymore. It's about lawsuits, legislation, ethics, and conflicts. So this season, we're putting those controversies under the spotlight. So we're not here to push an agenda or tell you which side to be on. We really just want to explore both of the options and hear from both sides. So this is the Fiduciary Frontline. This is the great 401k debate.
Here we go. Thank you, Marta. My name is Isaac Wood, ERISA 402A specialist here at Fiduciary Wise. And today's topic is ESG funds. What are ESG funds, you might be asking? Well, thank you for asking.
I am so glad you asked.
Thank you for your engagement. Here's your answer. ESG funds are investment vehicles that use environmental, there's your E, social, there's your S, and governance, there's your G, ESG criteria to evaluate which companies to invest in. So rather than focusing solely on financial returns, ESG funds aim to meet or aim to invest in firms that have specific criteria. So like from an environmental perspective, are they climate conscious? For example, low carbon emissions, sustainable practices, etc. From a social perspective, do they treat employees fairly and have positive community impact? And from a governance perspective, are they well managed, transparent, and ethically run? And so those criteria are used when choosing the investments that make up those ESG funds. So offering ESG investment options in a 401k plan lets participants then align their investments for their retirement with their personal values. So if they are really passionate about combating climate change or promoting diversity, their investments can align with those passions that they have. So these funds are by no means mandatory, but plan sponsors may offer them as part of the plan's investment lineup. And so what we wanted to kind of talk through today is should they or shouldn't they, right? And so some, I guess, additional background on some recent rulings. In 2022, the DOL final rule said that prudence and loyalty in selecting plan investments and exercising shareholder rights. An ERISA fiduciary must always measure risk and return and never subordinate their rights for the rights of the participants and beneficiaries. In addition, ESG funds are required to meet the same standards as any other mutual fund. And then in a 2023 interview with Ted Hauser, the DOL final rule around that prudence and loyalty, he said that the primary duty of an ERISA fiduciary has not changed from the DOL final rule in 2020, and that the DOL just wanted to be neutral on the use of ESG funds in a qualified plan. So while the DOL remains neutral, Marta, that's not what we're here for. You and I are not allowed to remain neutral in said area. So ESG funds, what say you?
I am pro ESG funds. I think that they, as mentioned in their description, it allows investors to align their values, appeal to the socially conscious investor. And I think it is particularly important to millennials and Gen Z, and not that we should only cater to certain demographics of the population. But I do think sometimes they are a harder group to get engaged. And so this could help align them and get them more interested and engaged in investing in their retirement plan. So why not?
Why not is a very good question, Marta. And the why not is just simply that as a fiduciary, you're tasked for keeping the best interest of a participants and their beneficiaries in mind, right? And so from an investment perspective, you have to hold to the same standards, and feel good is not one of those standards. And so doing what's best for participants does not mean just giving participants what they want all the time. And I think that's the challenge. Like being a fiduciary on a plan is like being a parent. This may be controversial too, but you can't just give your kids everything they want all the time.
You give them pizza, you give them candy, you joke around with them, you let them live their lives. They're adults, for God's sake.
And so just because it makes them feel good doesn't mean that it's something that should be investable in, and as a fiduciary that it's responsible for you to provide. And so I think the challenge in this ESG space, it's a, from an asset class perspective, it's on the newer side, right? And so the challenge has been as a fiduciary to find quality ESG investments. And so to my con on this stance is more to just include ESG for the sake of including ESG is not a route that a fiduciary should be taking. If you want to make ESG funds available, they have to pass the same standard as your other funds. So it's not a get out of jail free. Like, hey, this one
Okay.
Really leans into climate change, and so we're including it. Like, but is it a quality fund, or are the participants going to lose all their money in it?
Okay, I don't disagree with that. And I also don't agree that ESG funds are their own, and maybe I should, but I don't think ESG funds are their own asset class. I think if you can find an ESG fund that is a large cap growth, okay, they're probably not going to be the large cap growths. Is that too? But I think that there are opportunities where you can find good quality, and I don't disagree. Like, you don't just stick it in because it is an ESG fund. But if you have two funds that are very similar in performance and risk and fee, I don't know if those exist, and one of them is more ESG than the other, then I think there's not a reason to not put it in. So I'm not like, hey, let's fill up our lineup with ESG funds. But I do think if they meet criteria that have already been established, and that is like the thing that, these two funds are pretty equal, but
so
this,
the other element, you mentioned filling up your investment lineup, right? And so if you start down this route, the other challenge is, where do you stop? Because how many participants do you have in your plan? How many employees do you have, and how many different passions and causes are there? And so if you say you have a small cap fund that is ESG on the environmental side, and so you make that available, but then you've got someone else that is very passionate on a different side, and so are you going to give a fund to them as well to choose from? And so now it's where do you draw the line? Which participants are you appeasing by putting these investments in your lineup? Or are you, as a employer and as a fiduciary, are you taking a stance that it's your personal ESG opinions that matter? Because in today's world, there are two very fiery opinions about every single topic, which is why we're doing this pro and con, right? But there's two different sides. And so if you have a company of any size at all, you probably have both sides of any given topic within your workforce. And so are you able to find quality funds that provide it for everybody? And a lot of times
okay,
having one on one side can be controversial to the other side. And so now there's a lot to be considered if you're going to open this box up, the ESG box, and include these funds in, that it's not just as simple of like, yeah, we do it.
I disagree with that. I don't think that that it has to be like a particular segment of the ESG. Like, are they more heavy on the environmental piece? Are they just more on the social of treating their employees fairly? I feel like companies that develop that kind of culture seem to be more thoughtful maybe of multiple of those areas. But I don't think this isn't the same as like sending in a donation to some cause that you support. This isn't like, yes, save the pandas or koalas or I don't, whatever. This is just a company that does things more thoughtfully. I don't know. I'm not trying to be mean to non-ESG companies, but I just think there are companies that try and put more of those things at the forefront. This isn't about supporting a cause, like a specific cause. This is about supporting companies that are trying to do better for the environment, and for the people that work for them. And so, and do things more ethically, not in one particular area or another. So I don't think we have to like survey the population and be like, well, what do we feel most passionate about? But I think it's just like when I try and eat better, I don't eat better every day, and I try and change a few little things at a time. And so to me, it's that's what I think of from a fund lineup perspective. Everything doesn't have to be ESG. We don't have to cover everything, but offering some kind of options. And then maybe a plan has self-directed brokerage. And if participants are very specifically passionate about some particular things, then they can help.
Just took the words right out of my mouth.
The other element to keep in mind when looking to add ESG funds into your lineup is there is some volatility in this space, because a lot of the guidelines, a lot of the standards in order to be qualified as ESG, like they can very much ebb and flow depending on the power structure in our government, and who is which party is in control. And so from an investment perspective, do you want investments that their ability to operate the way that they want to operate, and then ultimately their returns can be volatile every 4 years, or even within those terms? And so it's adding, just like all things fiduciary, it's never just as simple as just, are we in or are we out? Is this the best for our participants? Does it provide the best from an investment perspective? Are we taking into account the risk that's involved? Are we taking into account the price that is involved? And are we taking into account the returns that we get as a result? And so all of that taken into account and then compared to the appropriate index in said asset class, are these funds appropriate for your lineup? And so if you can find ESG funds that accomplish what you're looking for them to accomplish, and are able to check out on that investment criteria, then by all means include them in your lineup. I think the challenge has been, and I think part of the reason we saw sort of the DOL address this directly the last couple of years was the focus on ESG was trumping, no pun intended, was trumping an investment policy statement already in place, right? To where you were able to check out of some of the requirements you were doing on, maybe you weren't able to, but you were checking out of some of the requirements you already had in case, so that you could add this sleeve because it was ESG. And it still needs to flow through the same process that you have as a fiduciary.
I agree with that. And I do think it is, and I was, in my example earlier, I was like, okay, if they have about the same return, about the same expense, so at the same risk, and otherwise it's just the ESG. And in reality, I don't know if that exists, because if you are operating in an economically friendly way, maybe that is more expensive. On the other hand, maybe you aren't paying, and if you're paying your people fairly. So I don't know if those things quite exist, but it does seem like there should be some kind of way to align your values with the way you invest. Certainly you can do that on a personal basis. And maybe I realize from like the plan fiduciary perspective, it seems like counterintuitive almost to me that we wouldn't use ESG because they seem to align with our values and doing the right thing and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, we do look at return, expenses, Although I think maybe there is the possibility in the ESG world to have fewer scandals, or maybe environmental penalties, or potentially improving returns over time. I think that there's a place for it. Maybe over time, more companies will just be ESG.
In reality, that's what we've seen over the last couple of years, right? If you were you're looking into this, 6, 7, 8 years ago, it was a real challenge to find quality ESG investments. A lot of times because they were just so new in many cases too. But now you're starting to have some track records. You're starting to have more quality investment firms being involved in them. It's starting to be easier to adopt these methodologies, and so all of that helps bring you investment options in the ESG space that are much more likely to be able to fit into your investment policy when it comes to returns and price. They're getting cheaper, their returns are getting better, and the risk is being lowered. And so it's aligning with the other methodologies in the asset classes. And so for sure, every year that we put together here into this, there's becoming more and more options for you to choose from. I would say if you're going to do that, to just make sure that it's the same process that's being used to grade out those funds as other funds, and that all of your participants, if you're doing it to give participants what they want, make sure that you're aware of all your participants, not just the loud ones.
Squeaky wheel. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, man.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Okay, well, I agree with that. I feel like surely there has to be a way for people to align their values with the way that they invest. And so I like that this is a topic that people are talking about. I do think that it's still important that you maintain the criteria for your investments. You can't just throw an ESG fund in there because Sally wants it and she's been talking about it for a long time and it's probably real good. I mean, you have put in, hopefully, an IPS. You have it for a reason. Those same criteria should apply.
You mentioned earlier kind of the solution
options
that I think helps a lot of this, and it's some type of self-directed brokerage account, right? That if there's a way with the service providers that you have on your plan to offer some type of a window out into other investments that allows participants to go invest in other vehicles that you wouldn't want to bring under your fiduciary responsibility inside the plan, that can allow you to kind of release some of that pressure on these. So it's then any participant that you have, hey, you can go out to this brokerage window and you can find those individual companies that you want to invest in. If you're passionate about that, you can put your money there. You can have access to all the different types of religious oriented funds out in the window as well, as opposed to having to make the decision on whether you bring these funds onto your investment lineup. Then you're tasked with having to be able to manage and monitor those. And if they don't pass your criteria, now what do you do? If they're out that window, that's the participant's decision and they can make those decisions. So to look at what options do your service providers provide to you that allow you to maybe make those provisions that way, as opposed to adding to the fiduciary risk and responsibility that you have on this plan.
So I think what you said is, and I meant to bring it up earlier, because if you do end up with an ESG fund in your plan, and then, in a few years it falls out of favor, what if you replace it with a non-ESG fund and your participants are not happy with that because they've had this fund in this share class and they, so I think that would be the more challenging part. Just how do you make sure your participants understand that that can't be the only factor involved? And hopefully over the next several years, like we talked about, we see more ESG funds that are, they perform well and we see more out there and we've got more options. So they could be replaced with another one, but I wouldn't want that to be this was an ESG fund, so we have to find an ESG fund replacement. I think that is where you can get in trouble as well. I say the same thing about precious metal funds. When people are like, oh, well, my participants want it. I'm like, okay, but if precious metal in general falls out of favor in the market, how do you address a replacement?
Well, you just saw a recent executive order talking about all kinds of alternative investment classes being available inside 401k plans. Same idea, same thoughts, right? Same idea, same thoughts. Do you want to just load up with a bunch of funds that are specific in these alternative cases? Or is it something that you can make available from a brokerage perspective and give access to, but not bring under your fiduciary responsibility? At the end of the day, just be careful, be thoughtful, but above all, be prudent.
Be prudent
in your process. And as a fiduciary, if you're able to be prudent in your process, and
that sounds reasonable. That sounds prudent.
Stick to it, then you will be in good shape. And that is the best interest of the participants. And so participants don't always know what their best interest is, but that doesn't change your responsibility as a fiduciary.
You bring up a good point, because there are a lot of there are a lot of participants who I feel, and we talked about this with the annuities, is like, what does the education around it look like to make sure that participants really understand what they are getting? And investing in your 401k plan and being responsible for 401k investments is not the same as me investing personally with my financial advisor. So it really requires like a different level of care and thoughtfulness. This isn't just let's put it all out there so everybody has options, because most of the time an advisor isn't sitting down with those participants to say, okay, let's talk about your goals.
If it's in the investment lineup and it's available, then what happens if a participant puts 100% of their savings in that fund?
And call that a prudent investment.
And do they know what they're doing? And then if it hits the fan and they didn't know what they were doing, that's on you, because it's your job to make sure they know what those investments are. And the more complex they are.
Right. And if you're a plan sponsor with 5 participants, you can probably manage that. If you're a plan sponsor with 12,000 participants, how are you ensuring that all of that information is getting to them?
and prudent.
Lots of things to consider in the investment realm in general. Okay, I feel like I got a lot of gold stars.
Declaring victory.
May I introduce myself? I am the invincible Victor.
I'm curious if our audience agrees. I'm also really curious if anybody has ESG solutions that they really like, that really are, performing well. I'm curious what's out there. How are other people solving for this with their participants? We talked about, the potential for a fund window or a brokerage window or something where participants do that on their own. Does anybody else have any thoughts or solutions on how to incorporate those in a good way? So we would love your dialogue and input on that. So what did we miss? Did we miss anything? But I love having these debates. I feel like we ended up kind of on the same page. But,
we'll see what the people decide if we were who won or not. That's really what we want to know.
The people, let the people decide. All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning into the Wise Fiduciary Podcast. We would love to hear from you, your thoughts, answer any questions. Please drop us a comment or send us a message. Or you can schedule a meeting with us at fiduciarywise.com/scheduling. Don't forget to join us next time for more insights, discussions, and debates with me and Isaac. So we will see you on the next episode.